Hey everyone, I'm Abby with SpiceWorks, and I'd like to welcome you to today's SpiceWorks Partner Webinar, The 7 Critical Disciplines of Server Management, brought to you by SpectorSoft. Before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that the webinar will be recorded, so if you have to step away for any reason, you will get an email with a link to the video in about a week. Also, we want your questions, so be sure to log those in at any point during the presentation, and I will get those over to our presenter today. Lastly, there is a mini iPad up for grabs, and we will announce that winner to one lucky attendee at the end of the webinar, so be sure to stick around. So now that we have all the housekeeping done, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Jack Doyle, and he's the Senior Sales Engineer for SpectorSoft. And in kicking us off, we have Greg Shields. Greg is the Senior Partner and Principal Technologist at Concentrated Tech. With more than 15 years of information technology, Greg has developed extensive experience in systems administration, engineering, and architecture, specializing in Microsoft OS, remote application, systems management, and virtualization technologies. Greg is a multi-year recipient of the Microsoft MVP VMware vExpert and Citrix Technology Professional Awards. So Greg, with that, take it away.
Thanks, Abby, and thanks also to all of you for taking some time out of your day. Man, it's just, I love these SpiceWorks webinars because we always get such a great attendance, and it's always a great opportunity, too, to come talk with you, to hear your stories, and to also learn a bit from you guys as much as you're here to learn from us about topics like today with server management and some of the 7 critical disciplines in server management today. I also want to thank SpectorSoft for sponsoring the webinar, giving us this opportunity to kind of chat and learn a little bit from each other about what are the things that we need to think about as it relates to managing our servers and our entire data center environments. Now, as we were kind of coming up with the concept for today's discussion, we come up with this notion of disciplines. And the idea of disciplines was something that, I don't know, it kind of resonated with me. I don't know if it resonates with you or not, but it resonates with the idea that here in IT, we're kind of seeing a bit of maturity in how we're going about performing the everyday actions that we need to accomplish here to get the job done. And I love this term disciplines because it just really highlights the fact that these days IT is kind of, after a number of years of dealing with the whole Wild West early days of dealing with computer sciences and information technology, we're beginning finally to establish what I can only call a kind of a conventional wisdom or an established conventional wisdom about how we perform our everyday activities. You know, IT today, just dealing with IT and dealing with managing our servers has grown beyond just clicking buttons. IT is no longer really about clicking the buttons because these days our users have gotten a lot more, they've gotten a lot more familiar with technology. In many cases, they've gotten a lot more educated about technology, and their expectations have also increased as well. Our servers just, they simply can't go down like they used to. You know, there was a day when the server would go down, we'd have plenty of time with which to be able to troubleshoot and bring that server back online. But those days are really over for a lot of our organizations because of the expectation of a near constant availability. We also, our relationship with our users has changed as well, and we just simply can't just dictate rules like we used to. You know, I blame things a bit on the iPad. The iPad brought the notion of applications to users in ways that they never really experienced before. And so because of that configuration control that users have, and because of that relationship they have with their devices, the way in which we go about telling them how they can perform their jobs has evolved pretty rapidly over the last few years. And as a consequence of that relationship changing, we've got to deal with the everyday activities of IT in a somewhat different fashion as well. Most importantly is, as our environments have evolved and as our environments have been around for longer and longer periods of time, those environments have just simply gotten more complex. If you've tried to do some of the same old gut feeling approach towards troubleshooting your servers and even your desktops, you might find that those gut feelings just don't work as well as they used to. And part of that is just simply the layers and layers of technology that we keep applying on top of each other in order to fulfill the needs that our users have for applications and services. So with that kind of introduction in place, I want to take a minute or two just to thank not only SpectorSoft for sponsoring this webinar, but also Jack Doyle, who's a senior sales engineer over at SpectorSoft. Jack and I are going to take a minute or two kind of to talk about some of these new 7 disciplines that are becoming ever more important in IT environments, and a little bit about how best to implement those disciplines in our environments today. Jack, first of all, thanks for coming on the line today.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it.
So, Jack, we spent some time prior to this call talking a bit about these 7 disciplines, and I think we've done a pretty decent job of kind of outlining the 7 primary or major activities that are important for people to recognize if they want to do proactive management of the servers in their environment. Why don't we just kind of step through these, I think, through all 7 of these, and just see if these are indeed things that I think that you would think are necessary, I think definitely that I think are necessary, and hopefully that the environment thinks are important as well. What do you think?
I think that's great. And one thing I notice as I read through these is some of these, as we go through them, people might be sitting there thinking, these are common sense things. I don't think there's anything that we're gonna go over that's really gonna blow your mind here. But the thing about it is these things are common sense almost to a point where you take them for granted and don't think about them as much as possibly you should. So I think this will be a great time to go over these things and get back to basics.
It's a really good point, actually, and in fact that kind of dovetails us directly into our first topic, or our first discipline, which is just the simple need to monitor critical services. I'll tell you what, Jack, that I've been running around various environments as a consultant for a lot of years, and one of the most interesting things about being a consultant is the opportunity to put a fresh pair of eyes onto an environment where the people in that environment perhaps spend a lot of time just staring for very long periods of time at those same configurations. And as a result, because you've stared at those same configuration screens for months or years, you might miss a few things. I myself find it just fascinating how few environments today actually incorporate monitoring solutions to alert them whenever problems occur. When you've traveled around, have you experienced that same sort of lack of monitoring for critical services that are out there?
I do, and you know what? It's not just in the IT industry either. There are a lot of things that when you're looking at it all the time, it helps to have a fresh set of eyes. Like you were saying, if you're writing, I've got a son in high school who writes a paper. My wife is going back to college. She's writing papers all the time and spending hours on it and going through it, and just then she asks me to look at it, and I notice, well, you missed a comma here and you misspelled this word there, but she'd been staring at it for so long that unless you have a fresh set of eyes taking a look at it, it's really easy to miss those things. And I think that that kind of is the same thing that you were talking about a minute ago when you go in there and you'll notice different critical areas possibly of an organization's IT infrastructure that they may have just looked at for so long and not really noticed how critical it is, or have kind of let it get on the back burner a little bit.
One of the things I'll add to that too is as an IT professional, sort of our infatuation with ensuring that a service is up or down, and sort of the binary approach towards how services are even monitored. In fact, in a lot of environments you'll find where some technology has been implemented to essentially ping an IP address as the ultimate validation as to whether a service actually exists. And you find in some of the more mature organizations that a deeper level of monitoring, one that goes beyond just simply pinging an IP address, is really functionally necessary to really kind of understand whether or not that service is indeed down or not. It's taking a step further into actual services or even into actual processes is something that, at least as I see it, becomes relatively important or very important. You know, another of the major critical disciplines that one should take a look at too is, as we're talking about services and we're talking about the processes that are associated with those services, is in recognizing when you have a process that perhaps is not behaving appropriately. And as we go one level deeper into the types of monitoring that we need for today's data centers, really understanding what processes are perhaps not behaving appropriately is a good example of a new discipline that's necessary. Now, I think you and I have an idea, Jack, of what a runaway process is, but can you talk a minute about, for those that are on the line, about what really constitutes a runaway process in today's data centers?
Well, to me, it's a process that is gotten out of control as far as the resources that it's consuming on a particular server. Generally, these days, with hardware not being as expensive as it used to be, I find that people are, or customers that I talk to, are building servers. They're purpose-built. So if they're running this application, they're building a server that they've built it, and whether it's a physical server or a virtual machine, they've tasked resources to that machine based on what that application is going to need as it's functioning. And if it starts to get out of control as far as the CPU utilization and memory utilization that particular application is consuming, then that may result in deteriorated levels of service for their customers or their users. And so when you expect the service to be using, let's say, a gigabyte of memory, and because you've only allocated so much memory to that server, then being able to know when that particular service or process is getting out of control becomes very important. That's kind of how I feel about it. You might have.
It seems to me like what.
Go ahead.
It seems to me like these are fairly challenging activities too. When you look at the tools that are available in the native Windows operating system, trying to leverage those tools like perfmon and like Task Manager, being able to use those in a central sense to be able to monitor lots of servers is quite a bit of a challenge. And not to mention, perfmon is a tool for understanding at a large scale, at the macro scale, what's going on the system. Trying to drill down into individual processes and compare today's relevance of the process with yesterday's relevance of that process, or how its behaviors are going, is something that's fairly challenging to do with those native tools, wouldn't you say?
Oh, sure. And not to knock on Task Manager or perfmon, those are both great troubleshooting and monitoring tools. But as you know, Task Manager just shows you what's going on right now. You can look at the overall processor utilization on a machine over the last several minutes in Task Manager, but generally it's what the server is doing right now. Perfmon can obviously be scheduled to run over a period of time, but there really aren't any alerting capabilities in perfmon that are, they're not great alerting capabilities. It can write to the event log and a couple of other things like that, but you can't get an email, for example, if a process is out of control with perfmon without going through a lot of different effort to create a script to handle all that and so forth. So they're good tools, but they're very limited in their capabilities, I think.
Man, we were talking now about perfmon, but there are a lot of these native Windows tools that just are nigh insufficient for dealing with, some of the major activities that we have to think about today. And the third discipline that you just really can't ignore are those nefarious users out there, or those, even worse, nefarious administrators, the kinds of people that are out to do you harm. And when I think about the Windows tools that are just really not that great, I can't ignore the Windows security log. The other half of concentrated technology, Don Jones, did a test one time of the Windows event log, tried to figure out exactly how many entries got logged for any particular action. And I think once he loaded he loaded a notepad file, made a change and closed the notepad file, and it ended up popping some 14 or 16 individual log entries into the log. Now, that is one instance of potentially suspicious account activity, but I can think of a whole variety of other suspicious account activity types of things that need to be yanked out of that log if we're trying to figure out if someone is doing something, and if so, what are they required to do. I anticipate, or I expect, you've probably got some good examples of potentially suspicious account activity sorts of items that are important for all of us on the line to really watch out for.
Oh, sure, and that I've seen exactly what you're talking about several times, or several hundred times, I should say. One seemingly simple action on a computer can certainly generate, I've seen in some cases, 30 or 40 different messages in the security event log. It can get out of control. It does all depend on what you have Windows set to audit. You can certainly, especially starting in Windows Server 2008 with those advanced auditing subcategories, you can certainly start to limit some of those. I'm not sure when Don ran that test back with Server 2003 and prior you only had 9 different options, and it was kind of all or nothing on those options. Now with starting in Server 2008, you can turn on and off different subcategories within those 9, which definitely makes things a lot better. But there is a lot of information in the security log, and it's my opinion that if you have the ability to store that information for a period of time, it's better to have more information than you need than less. The important thing is being able to find the needle in the haystack. If you have a lot of different events, being able to look through there and find the ones that do mean something to you, because you don't always know ahead of time what's going to be important and what's not. So if you can keep it, it's good to keep it. But it's not necessarily, as you were saying earlier, not necessarily behaviors that are meant to be, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not coming to mind at the moment. But activities that don't happen on a regular basis, but could be critical. Some of the things I'm thinking about that you would want to know about when they occur would be potentially clearing the security event log or changing audit policies. So if audit policies get changed, it's very important to know about those things so that you expect to start receiving different information from those audit policies, or account lockout policies being changed, things like that don't change on a regular basis. So when they do change, it's very important to know about those, whether those changes were intentional or unintentional. So I think those might be some of the things you'd want to highlight in this case. Do you have any thoughts on this, Greg?
Well, Chuck, let me first pose the question out to the audience. If you have a question, there should be an Ask a Question box somewhere on your screen. That if you've got a question for either Jack or myself, please feel free to drop it in that Ask a Question box, and we'll get to them either here during our conversation or towards the end of the webinar when we get to the formal Q&A period, and also when we draw for that iPad winner. Jack, Jason has a question, and so there are tools that are out there that can help with some of this event log stuff. Do those tools typically require like WMI?
Yes, our product in particular, Server Manager, which we're going to look at later on, it does use WMI for that. Everything that we do in Server Manager is agentless and uses all native protocols for those as well, as native as WMI is, I guess I should say. But yes, we do utilize WMI for that. And in most cases, unless a product has an agent, WMI really is the way to go as far as that goes.
So one of the other interesting sort of things that are related to monitoring, I think, in today's world is not only just monitoring the account activities, but also monitoring for the service activities. And you can't really think about service activities without thinking about web services. And in fact, the fourth of our 7 disciplines here is analyzing just the behaviors of the critical URLs in your environment. I mean, we've all seen examples of situations where a website has gotten defaced by some hacker that comes in and backdoors their way into our environment. But I can think in terms of behaviors not only as being a defacement incident, but just a website that is not perhaps delivering the information that is expected at a particular period of time. We had a question here that popped in from Todd. He asks, when you're monitoring external solutions like websites, are there ways to report when those websites are down, or are there ways to report when those websites don't provide that kind of information? What kinds of examples or technologies would people lay into place, Jack, in order to be able to monitor when a URL isn't behaving the way it should?
Sure, and its simplest, the simplest method would be to utilize a recurring task, which we're going to take a look at later on in this presentation, that can go out and retrieve a document. And as far as document goes, I might be referring to just an HTML page, a document on a website, and verify that that website is able to return that document. But to take it a step further, what's also important when you're monitoring a website would be to maybe provide some text or a string of text that you're going to be looking for on that page, because just because the page returns something back to a browser doesn't necessarily mean that the website is functioning properly. It could be returning an error code. Well, just because the web server returns something doesn't mean it's functioning. So you want to, one, check to make sure that it returns something. That's obviously very important. But then you also may want to check to verify that specific text is on a page. Or if there is an error condition that comes up periodically, you might know what that error condition would indicate on the page, you could look for that as being indicative of a problem. And also, on top of that, you want to check and make sure that your SSL certificate for that website, if there is one, there may not be, but if there is one, you want to make sure that that certificate validates. You want to make sure that there aren't any certificate errors that could potentially be generated when a user browses to that site. So those are all things that you'll want to watch for when you're monitoring a website's availability.
You know, while you were talking, I've got an interesting question here from Tristan, who asks, you mentioned these auditing subcategories and how that there used to be 9 categories for auditing, and now there are like 50 categories for auditing. He was wondering where they're actually located. I believe, although you can get access to them in the local policy, I believe you can access them through group policy as well. Is that the case, Jack?
You can, yes, and you need to, you would have to edit those audit policies on a Windows Server 2008 or later server. Even if you apply those policies back to something prior to 2008, like a 2003 server, let's say you edit the GPO and you define these subcategories and it applies to a 2003 server, that 2003 server will simply ignore them because it's never heard of them before and doesn't know what to do with them. But they are in a separate place, and I would certainly be happy to very quickly point those out if you'd like. They're in a completely separate place within the GPO. But yeah, they're there. You would want to go into a group policy object on a Windows 2008 or later server, and then you'll look in the computer configuration section. I believe they're down somewhere near the bottom there. They're in a completely separate place from the old ones, but they're there.
We have a 5th item here in our list of 7 disciplines that we want to talk about, and that 5th item is what I think I actually worded this in the most complicated way possible: the preemptive alerting on resource shortfalls, which is complicated speak for saying when you're just using too much CPU or when you're just using too much memory. In the old days, when all of our servers and services were on their own individual physical machine, the days of experiencing resource shortfalls like CPU and memory were relatively limited to a certain few use cases. But these days, as more and more environments are making the move towards virtualization and just simply the consolidation of many servers onto one server, we have to be much more conscious about the resources that our applications are using. No longer gone are the days where we could just put 4 gigs of RAM in a domain controller just because 4 gigs of RAM is cheap, and it's essentially what's on the parts list for the servers that we buy. We have to spend a little bit more time actually thinking about the actual resource utilization, the actual memory and CPU utilization that our applications are using, and then to try to tailor those so that we end up assigning just the most correct amount of resources for that machine. Now, and Jack, I'm assuming in your experience you've had an opportunity to do some of that tuning. Are there any good best practices for helping people figure out how much CPU and how much memory an application requires?
Not that I'm aware of. You kind of threw me for a loop right there, to be honest, Greg. I'm still of the, this may be old school, but I'm still of the thought that, give it as much as you can afford to give it. But obviously there comes a point where the application or the service is only going to use so much. So it's certainly possible to waste money on these things. If if you have something that, a 32-bit application that can only address so much memory, and then you go and throw 64 gigabytes of memory into a server to run just that one application, you obviously could have spent that money on that RAM somewhere else. But you do want to keep in mind, though, that these applications can start to consume a lot of memory, and when your server is unable to address memory because it's using so much, then you start to use the swap space, or in Windows speak, the page file, and now you have gone from using fast memory to slow disk accesses, and in turn the responsiveness of your application is going to slow down. So this, I think, is, as I said earlier, some of these disciplines are going to maybe seem kind of obvious. I think this is the one that, to me, probably seems to be the most obvious, is that CPU and memory utilization. When your CPU has a line waiting to get in, and your memory is overloaded and starting to page a lot, then you're certainly going to have some sluggish responses from that application, and your users will be none too happy. So all of these things are great because what they allow you to do is preemptively respond to some of these things, hopefully before your users notice them. Going back to the critical URL behaviors a few minutes ago, I was talking to a fellow not too long ago who was running on a Windows server. He had an Apache web server running there for a third-party application that they were running, and they haven't been able to figure out why it happens, and the third-party vendor hasn't been able to figure out why it happens, but they would notice every so often the Apache server would just completely stop responding, and they didn't realize it until one of their users would call up and suggest there might be a problem, and then they would go explore it and determine that. And they started using our product to monitor that web server every few minutes. I think he was maybe having it check that web server every 2 minutes or something like that, and then he was able to configure that to restart the Apache service whenever the page wouldn't respond. So these all go to being able to preemptively attack these problems before they affect your users too much. So this CPU and memory utilization one is just another one of those ways to do that. And also something else that goes in here, I think, is monitoring how much disk space you have. It's very easy to run out of disk space these days and not realize it. There aren't a lot of great built-in tools in Windows if you're monitoring more than a handful of servers to be able to easily see how much disk space you have available on those servers. And when you run out of disk space, some bad things can happen too, and I think that's very important also.
Oh yeah, running out of any resource is kind of that silent problem, and you can find yourself spending a lot of time looking in the wrong place for a solution when the solution is, in fact, you're just out of resources. You know, our sixth item here is one that we've been hearing in IT. All of us have been hearing a lot more these days. Automate, automate, automate. And in this day of do more with less, and in this day of just having less tools in order to be able to do things, and less people in order to use the tools, in order to be a more useful administrator, you have to be a more automated administrator. You know, in fact, some might argue that the job of administrator is moving ever more towards being more like a developer, in that creating automations out of command line tools like Windows PowerShell, or the variety of graphical tools that exist in the third party, is the only way that you can become or add that force multiplying effect to your job as an administrator. So Jack, you had mentioned earlier that you had a really interesting war story about automation that relates to this whole principle of automating tasks and processes. Why don't you take a minute and tell us your war story?
Sure, thank you, Greg. So you know, what we're talking about here today really has to do with monitoring. So some of these automations aren't necessarily the automations like running backups and things like that, but responding to issues that might come up. And I recently had a customer who they had noticed sometime in the middle of the night, a couple of times a week, their internet was going down, and they were trying to troubleshoot it. It was sometime in the wee hours of the morning, and their ISP wasn't being very cooperative, and they couldn't really figure out where the problem was, and the guy would come in a couple nights a week and try to figure out what was going on, and that would be on the nights that it didn't happen. So he asked me if I had a way to help him ping a particular address out on the internet continuously every 6 or 8 seconds or every minute or whatever he wanted to do. And if it was unable to get a response, he wanted to see if I could get a trace route to that IP address at that time that it became unavailable, and we were very easily able to do that. So that was one instance that would be an example of automating tasks and processes in response to a particular problem. We also spoke a few minutes ago about the other gentleman I had worked with where the Apache server would go down, and he had his system automatically respond to that by restarting that Apache process. So being able to automate some of these responses to these issues, or at least have something that is able to help you generate additional troubleshooting information when it happens is quite nice, and I think that's very important and certainly could save you a lot of trouble, especially in the case of this guy with his intermittent internet problem in the middle of the night.
I spend a lot of time running around various IT conferences and talking to people about technology, and I've had the opportunity of late to give people the automation oath, or have people take the automation oath, where they pledge to never perform any activity manually ever again. If it's something that can be done, it's something that can be automated. And whereas that first time of creating that automation might take a little bit more time than performing the task manually, it's the reuse of that automation where you start to really begin to see the benefits of going through those extra efforts in doing something via an automated fashion. You know, automation is great for the tasks that you're doing, and automation is also great when it comes time to actually take all of these variety of different kinds of log data and suck them into a central database, a central location where that log data can be best managed. I know you and SpectorSoft are here to not only to sponsor this webinar and help us figure out what some of these disciplines are, but I'm guessing you and SpectorSoft are here also to talk a little bit about how the tools that are out there that can help with the consolidation and management of this log data. Can you talk a little bit about some of those tools?
Yeah, what we were going to talk about here in a little while is our very affordable product, Server Manager, which can help with all of these different things on the list here. It's not only a server and service and application monitoring solution, but it's also a complete log management and reporting solution. So Server Manager allows you from one central location to collect all of your Windows event log data from all those different Windows servers that you're managing, consolidate them into one database, be able to view that information easily and centrally, be able to filter on that, provide reports or near real-time notifications of information as it comes in if it's a critical type of alert. Also, Server Manager can consolidate log information from text file-based logs. That Apache web server logged its information to a text file. As you probably know, IIS, Microsoft's web server, logs the majority of its information to text files, so being able to consume that information and centrally store that and review it is also critical. And also Server Manager, we haven't talked about this much, can receive log information from devices that are capable of sending their syslog information or syslog messages, which might be your routers, firewalls, Linux servers, and VMware servers are capable of doing that. Firewalls is very critical. You know, as anybody can probably guess, if you were going to hack into or someone was going to hack into your company's network, the first place they're going to have to get through is your firewall, and the second thing that they're going to do once they get in there is clear that log file. So if those log messages can be shipped in real time as they're generated, that's just one additional layer of security that's nice, and then being able to centralize that and review it all together is great, and we have a very easy way to do that with our product.
You know, we've got a bunch of really awesome questions that are coming in, but before we get to those questions, Jack, I know you've got a quick demo here that you've brought that can show people some of the tools that you just discussed here just a minute ago. Why don't you take control here for just a second and show those people that are following along at home some of the tools that they can use to consolidate their log data.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. Are you able to see my screen now? Probably not. It's still red on my side over here. Audio. Oh, you're able to see it. Great. Yep. So this is Server Manager, what we were talking about briefly a few minutes ago. And some of the different things I want to show you. I'm going to go through this very quickly, but any of you are welcome to reach out to me if you'd like to do a one-on-one and go into more detail about what's available in this product. So pardon me if I go very quickly. I want to respect everyone's time here today. But what I'm going to go ahead and do, I've got a nice clean install that I really haven't done anything in this install yet, but I have created I pre-created a few filters so that we could save some time here today. But I'm going to go ahead and add all of my Windows servers in my lab environment here into Server Manager. We're going to very easily add those here so we can start collecting information from them. It's as simple as that. I just went ahead and added 2 domain controllers and 2 member servers. And the way Server Manager works is we will create configuration templates, and a configuration template defines what we want Server Manager to do, how often we want Server Manager to do it, and finally what we would like Server Manager to do if a particular trigger occurs or a particular condition is met. So since this one takes just a minute, I'm going to kind of work backwards here from the way I originally planned. I'm going to go ahead and collect all the log information from these servers first. Since it does take it a couple of minutes to collect that, it can be doing that while we are going through some of these other things. So I've already got an event consolidation and monitoring template here, and this template is pre-configured in Server Manager. You can just go in here and modify it if you want to, but I'll give you an idea of what it's going to do. So I've got this one. I can give it a name. It's my event log consolidation and monitoring template, and I've indicated here that I want this template to execute every hour. There are two types of schedules in Server Manager for any of the templates that you configure. They can be run on a fixed schedule, which is what you would traditionally think of when it comes to scheduling. Every Saturday at 1 a.m., weekdays at 3 p.m., every hour on the half hour, that sort of thing. Range schedules, which is what I'm using in this case, tell Server Manager that I want it to perform this task every X number of hours or every day or once a week. And then Server Manager will take all of the tasks that it has configured on that schedule and it'll distribute them over that time. So in this case, it's going to collect the log information from all of these servers once an hour, but not necessarily simultaneously. Then on the Logs tab, I indicate which logs I want Server Manager to collect. These are some that are listed in all cases, but you can also select any of your servers, and once you do that, you'll see it'll query those servers and list out all of the event logs that are available on that server. So not just the built-in Windows event logs. If you're running something like Symantec antivirus, and I'm just making this one up at the moment, but it could very well create a Windows event log where its messages go. So any viruses that it detects or anything like that, it would write to this Windows event log. So any of those third-party Windows event logs you can collect as well. I've indicated I want Server Manager to save all of the messages. You can apply a filter to only save messages that pass this filter. So if you do know exactly what you need ahead of time, you can tell Server Manager to run all of the received messages through a filter and only save the ones that pass the filter. Most people that I talk with want to save everything that they can and just use filters to review the information. So you can do that either way. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to apply this configuration template. It indicates I haven't applied it anywhere yet. I'm going to go ahead and apply it to all of these 4 servers that I have added into Server Manager. What I didn't do, but what I will mention is you can group these together and you can apply the configurations to a group and then it will be inherited by all of the members of that group, and any of your servers could certainly live in multiple groups. So now, as you can see, I've applied that event log consolidation template to those particular servers, and now Server Manager is going to reach out to those servers and it's going to collect all of that event log information and store it for us. So we'll give that a few minutes to go, and we'll come back in a few minutes and look at that log information. What we talked about earlier, what Greg and I talked about, one of the things was monitoring critical services. That's also very easy to do in Server Manager. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a group. I'm going to call it Domain Controllers. And let's say I want to monitor. These are all, my 2 domain controllers are both 2008 R2 domain controllers. So I'm going to put my 2 domain controllers into this domain controllers group. I'll just link them there. And what I want to do on my domain controllers is I want to monitor, I'll very quickly set up the ability for us to monitor 3 critical services. We're going to monitor our NetLogon service, we're going to monitor the DNS server service, and we'll also monitor our Active Directory service and verify that all of those are running. So I can create 3 templates very quickly. I'll just go in here and select New Template, Windows Service Monitor. I'll call this one NetLogon. I'm going to check it every 5 minutes. If I indicate what one of my servers here, I'm going to apply it to the group, but I'm going to go ahead and select the server here and then select the service drop-down, and it's going to show me, it's going to query that server and show me a list of all the services that are currently installed on that server. So I'm going to take my NetLogon service, indicate what I want Server Manager to do. If Server Manager detects that that service is stopped, I want it to start it and fire trigger actions, and trigger actions are defined on the next screen. I could have Server Manager send me an email if it detects that that particular service is stopped, and once that service recovers, I could have it send me another email. So that's very easy to do. Select OK, or I'll apply it to my domain controllers group first, select OK, and now Server Manager is monitoring that net logon service on each of those two domain controllers. I can just create a copy of this particular template to very easily set it up to monitor a second service. So I'll create a copy of that, go right in here. So we'll just create two to save time. So we'll call this Active Directory, monitor, select a server here so I can get a list of services that are running. Up here, Active Directory. I don't want to change anything else. I've already got my actions defined. Domain controllers, apply, and it's done. So now Server Manager is going to go out to those two servers and monitor that service as well. We can go review how that works if we want to here very quickly. I'll just take this one. Explore. It's got a question mark because it hasn't run yet, but I can force it to go and check that service now. And as you can see, the Active Directory Domain Services service is running. If Server Manager detected that it wasn't running for whatever reason, it would then start that service for me. After it'll send me an email, let me know it's not running, attempt to start the service. Provided that it's successful, I will get another email notification a couple of minutes later indicating that that service has been restarted. Let's talk about the monitoring the process resource utilizations that we were talking about earlier. SQL Server is a perfect example of that. I've got SQL Server running on this server here, this MS01 server that we're looking at. I'll just jump right in here and I'll create another template. This time I will use a process resources monitor, and I'll just call this one SQL. I have OCD, so I label and group everything. We're going to check this SQL Server service every minute. And what's also nice that we haven't mentioned yet is we do have the ability to change the schedule once a monitor triggers. So if we're checking something every 10 minutes and it triggers, we can reduce that schedule to every minute until it recovers. So once we've noticed a problem, we can check it more often if we want to. Also, we can enable a failure rate. We didn't see that in any of the templates we were looking at a few minutes ago as being something that was turned on, though it was there. A failure rate means that we are not going to trigger our actions, whether it's some kind of script that fixes the problem or sends an email, until we notice the problem occur a certain number of times within a certain period of time. And this is very critical on CPU, for example, where just opening an application can spike the CPU up to, let's say, 90 or 95 or 100% for a few seconds. And if Server Manager is checking that at that moment, you don't want that to be indicative of a problem necessarily, because if you wait 10 more seconds, it's going to be fine. So you can tell Server Manager, we want to see it go above this threshold a certain number of times over a certain period of time before it indicates there's a problem. Going over to the Monitor tab now, I'm going to select a server like before. And if I select my drop-down, it's going to show me a list of all of the processes that are currently running on that server. If it's not running right now, we could certainly type in a path to an executable, but this will show us what's running on that server at this time, and I meant to select this one. This has my SQL Server service. So I'll select SQL Server, and then I can indicate the thresholds that I want to be indicative of a problem. So if SQL Server is using more than 75% of the CPU or more than a gigabyte of memory, then that would, in my case, be indicative of a problem. What do I want Server Manager to do in that case? I'll just say I'll have it send me an email. And once the issue is recovered, I can have it send me an email as well. So I'll go ahead and apply that to my SQL Server. And we'll see that it applies up here under MS01, wherever that disappeared to. Here it is. And we'll go into there and look. It's initialized. I can run it. We'll give it just a moment to return the information. And we can see here that at the moment, SQL Server is using 0% of my CPU, 598 megabytes of RAM. And it also counts, but I don't have it triggering on threads and handles at the time. And if we have more than one data point, we could then go and look at a historical chart, and we could see what that looks like over time. And on some of these monitors in Server Manager, we do have the ability to view resources, pings, CPU, memory utilization, things like that in real time. So if we're trying to troubleshoot an issue, we could watch this as we're working on that issue and see if anything helps to resolve it. So that's nice as well. I do know we're running a little bit short on time, so what I would like to jump to would be the log information that we collected. So in Server Manager, the log information that you collect can be stored a few different ways. We store that information in the file system, or you can store that information in a database, and we support Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, and MySQL. This environment that we're working in at the moment is utilizing MySQL as a database backend. So what I want to do right now, we were talking a little bit ago, Greg, about the monitoring of the security event log. So in a large environment, it might take me a while to go through here and select the security event log for all of my servers. You know, you can see here it takes several seconds to select it just for 3 of them. So we do have the option to search through the logs that we've collected. I can select that I want to review all of my security event logs. It's going to find them. I have 4 of them. I can select those, and I can apply a filter here if I want to. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and select OK without applying a filter. And you can see so far today, and this is just in my VMware lab, so there's not a lot of real-life activity going on here. Just whatever I do as I'm playing with this environment. In a real-life environment, you've probably got more, but you can see here so far today, I've got more than 22,000 event log messages from the security event logs from 4 servers. I have seen customers, and I know there are some that have more than this, but I have seen customers that generate millions of messages on a single server in a single day. So there can be a lot of information to sort through and sift through. But we can apply filters in Server Manager so we can look for exactly what we want to look for. So as an example, if I want to see all user accounts that were created, I can select that filter. I haven't created any today, so it's going to go to page 2, and it's going to show me just event log messages that correspond to a user account being created. We can also have Server Manager notify us when these things occur, either once it collects the information on its schedule or in real time. We can watch these Windows event logs in real time, and when an event occurs, Server Manager can let you know about it. So let's say, for example, user accounts being deleted. User accounts in some organizations are deleted all the time as just a regular business practice. But if so 1 user account being deleted, no big deal. But if we see 3 user accounts get deleted in the course of an hour, well, that never happens. So we want to know about it. We could certainly tell Server Manager, don't notify me on the first one or the second one, but once you've seen a 3rd user account be deleted in the period of an hour, I want to know about it. Any of these filters can be used as the basis for generating reports in Server Manager. So if you need a report of errors in your event logs or particular events that match another filter that you've created or a built-in filter, then Server Manager can do that. It can deliver those reports in email, it can drop them into shares, and so forth. We also have some pre-built reports. So if you're looking for something like account management as an example, we can very easily generate a report for that. I'll just go right over here to reports, say new report. These are the report types of reports that you can generate in Server Manager. I'll select account management. I will say, just because I have to choose something, I'll just say 3 a.m. Go over here to last 7 days. Actions, I have to give it an action, so I'll just pick something out of the blue here. Let's apply this to all of our servers. Let's do that here, account management, execute. That will generate the output file wherever we asked it to put it, or I can right-click it and say View Report, and we can view that information right in the Server Manager console. So each of these represents a user in Active Directory, and then, as you can see, I created a bunch of these yesterday in preparation for today's webinar. As you can see, and this is something that you were talking about, Greg, earlier, seeing a bunch of events for the same thing. I create a user, and I get 5 events for that. So we've got the event where the user was created, a couple of attributes get changed, the password, the account password gets reset and changed, and then finally the user account's enabled. And you can double-click any of these and see the actual event log message related to that. So as I said, I want to respect everyone's time and don't want to go too long, so I will at this time hand it back over to Greg to field any questions that we might have. Greg?
Sure, we've got actually a lot of questions, more so than I think we can get through in the couple of minutes we have left, but let's see how many we can get through here, Jack. Let's see here.
Oh, by the way, would you like me to show very quickly where those audit subcategories are? I can do that very quickly.
Why don't I go through and find the first question while you go and locate those.
Sure.
So
sure.
First question comes in from Kenneth, who asks, we were talking about shortfalls before, and specifically resource shortfalls, and now that solid state hard drives are becoming more and less expensive, I'll say, it's actually worth it to move from normal spinning or traditional spinning hard drives to solid state drives. Kenneth has said he's using solid state drives for his VM servers, but he's thinking about solid state drives for use more and more. Well, you're still pulling that up there, Jack. When it comes to a solid state drives, just like any drive, provide an amount of capacity and provide that amount of capacity at a certain level of performance. That level of performance for solid state drives is significantly higher than what you would get for more traditional spinning hard drives, so even those that are running at the 10K or 15K RPM rate. And so when the price point gets to the point where price and size of the drive becomes something that is either less or at a level that is equivalent to the amount of effort you can put into them, then yeah, solid state drives are going to become more and more important for all kinds of machines and not just for virtual machines. Jack, I think you found the location for the advanced audit policy.
I did. I pulled up my default domain controllers policy, but as I said, any group policy that's edited on a Windows Server 2008 or later machine will be able to see this. We're going to go to computer configuration, then you'll go to Windows settings, security settings, all the way down here to advanced audit policy configuration, and then audit policies. And as you go into each of these, you'll see now instead of the 9 or 10 or whatever it was before, now you've got subcategories for each of these and can enable exactly what you want.
Got another question here from Tihai, who asks, is there the ability in the SpectorSoft product to analyze response times or to script up the analysis of response times, such as, for example, the ping response time between two geographic sites?
Not between two sites, but between Server Manager, where the ping is being generated from, and the location that you're pinging, it certainly can. If I go over to another machine here that I actually have had running for a long time, we can look at the historical chart. And this machine gets shut down every night, so not all of this data looks fantastic, but you can see here it will graph out the ping response times over a period of time. So you could certainly analyze that if that's something that you need to do.
Jesse's got an interesting question. Is there a maximum file size for any specific kind of log file that SpectorSoft can analyze? In this case, there's a 1 gigabyte text log file that needs to be monitored.
Wow, that's a really big file. I would be surprised that a log file would get that big. Windows won't handle that very well in a lot of cases. I don't know that there is a limit within the product. It's more or less a limit of resources and what Windows would be able to handle as far as accessing that file and being able to review the contents of it. I've never personally seen a log file get that big. Generally, they're rolled off and recycled by then. But that's a great question that I honestly don't have an answer to. I've never seen personally a log file that's too big to be handled. But if Greg, if you can make a note, or Abby, if someone can make a note of that person's contact information, I could certainly find out and reach back out to you.
Elaine wants to know, does SpectorSoft work with virtual machines as well as virtual hosts?
It does work very well with virtual guests, and in the next version of Server Manager coming out very soon, we are going to be adding the ability to do some monitoring on the virtual host machine, VMware host machines as well.
Al's got a problem with a failed service, or maybe it's a failed service that's refusing to start. Can SpectorSoft help him in troubleshooting either that failed service or a service that refuses to start?
Probably not. What we do is we attempt to restart the service. So what you would want to do with Server Managers, you would want to set it up to notify you when the service stops, and then Server Manager will attempt to start it again, But if it fails to start, then it fails to start, and you would not get that recovery email. And you would certainly need to figure out what the problem is with the service. A lot of times you will find that services will write information to the application event log if they're failing to start, that might indicate the cause of the problem. Or if it's a third-party application, like the Apache web server we were talking about earlier that runs as a service, or MySQL also runs as a service, they might write to their own log files when the service attempts to start if it fails. I know MySQL does that. If it won't start for some reason, there are some log files in the file system that you can look at that would be indicative of what the problem is. Server Manager will attempt to start it again for you, but the service needs to be able to start for that to work.
Aaron looks like he's got a security problem in his environment. He wants to know how would he find out using your solution if someone is sending confidential files from a server to themselves?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. Server Manager is not going to help you with that. We do, however, have products that will help you with that. Our Spector 360 product can certainly do that. It can monitor all of your users' activity on their machines, including documents that are sent either through email or copied to removable drives that the users might take with them. And then it can provide context around that as well. So if a user emailed a personal outside email address a confidential document that's a violation of your company's policy, but then you could review back in Spector 360 and see, okay, well, the CIO was at a conference and forgot the file and just emailed this guy and asked him to send it to him, so you can get some context around that as well. We do have solutions for exactly what you're asking about. Server Manager is not the solution for that, but certainly reach out to us, and we can show you the product that would help you with the issue that you're encountering.
Got another question here. Will either this or any of the other SpectorSoft solutions monitor OS X servers?
Server Manager doesn't. It will monitor certain services on OS X servers, so if it's running SMTP or POP3 or IMAP or DNS or something like that, Server Manager can monitor those using native protocols. I don't know if I'm not too familiar with OS X servers, so you have to pardon me here, but if it's able to share disks out via Windows file sharing, then we should be able to monitor available disk space on those OS X servers as well. I can't guarantee that because, like I said, I'm not too familiar with OS X servers. And our user monitoring products do have the ability to monitor user activities on Mac computers, but whether or not that includes OS X servers, I'm not certain. So if you want to follow up with us at the sales email address that you see on the screen there, I'd be happy to find that information out for you for sure.
Got time for one more question here, and that's from Mike. Mike asks, can the tasks be fired as actions that are run with arguments or commands within an application?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So let's jump back over here to my VMware. One task that I have configured here is to run a SQL Server maintenance job that backs up my SQL Server database and shrinks it. And that is under here somewhere. SQL Server, here it is, create process. And this runs once a day, or actually I have it disabled because I just run it by hand. But if we go in here, we indicate the process that we want to run, and then the arguments. Now this is just a scheduled process that we want Server Manager to launch, and in fact it's launching it on a different machine than Server Manager is installed on, which is nice. We can also launch a process as a response to an issue. So going back over here to this SpectorSoft ping, if I go and select the properties of this template, under Actions, I am launching a traceroute script that I created. So we're going to launch that script, and it's going to launch traceroute.bat with the host name as an argument. And then here's the batch file that it's going to launch, and it will automatically create that traceroute document and store it in this folder. So whether it's a scheduled process or whether it's a process that you're launching as a response to a particular trigger, yes, you can certainly provide arguments. And in fact, we do have several variables that you can use as arguments if you need the current date or current time or the name of the host that's having an issue. We can provide those as arguments.
Well, Jack, why don't you flip back to that last slide one more time. I want to thank you and also SpectorSoft for once again sponsoring this webinar. I thought it's been a great use of our time here for the hour, and I learned a lot. I hope you did too, Jack.
I did, actually. And I did get a message back here from another kind of a backup panelist friend of mine, Matt. Matt, I appreciate you helping me get this information. And he indicated to me that Spectre 360 can monitor activities on OS X server.
So with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Abby. Abby, I think you've got an announcement to make as well as some closing thoughts. Abby?
I do. Thanks, guys, for another great presentation. We have a winner picked out. It is Sean Alvis. I don't know if I said that name correctly, but it's A-L-V-I-S. So, Sean, be on the lookout for an email from SpectorSoft, and they will coordinate getting that prize over to you, and congratulations. Just wanted to remind everyone again that you will get an email with a link to the recording in about a week, so be on the lookout for that. And with that, guys, just want to say thanks again. Great presentation, and to everyone on the line, thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you all on future webinars.
Yes, thank you, Abby, and thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate your time.